Now the fourth leak has been discovered along the Nordstream 1 and 2 pipelines, and nobody wants to be responsible for the previous protection of these pipelines. So we've heard the Ministry of Defense of Germany saying this is not our job. They're not supposed to protect critical civilian infrastructure. Now, of course, the question arises, what is the point of the German armed forces? I mean, they can't really defend the country in a conventional war. They can't attack other countries, of course. And so all they've been doing is sending small contingents of troops to places such as Mali or Afghanistan. But shouldn't they be used to patrol the oceans and secure vital, critical infrastructure? So this is something that's very, very, very odd. So then people in Denmark and Norway, they're now talking a lot, but they're not really, haven't been doing that much. So everybody's talking, nobody really was doing. Then we had quotes from the former intelligence chief in Germany, Foreign Intelligence Agency, a man called Gerhard Schindler, and he was saying that only a state actor could have blown up those pipelines, and all would point towards Russia because they would gain the most from blowing up basically their own pipelines. Not really a convincing argument, and you have to ask what exactly was his intelligence service doing before to protect these pipelines. Did they cultivate great sources in the Kremlin or in the Russian Navy, the armed forces? Did they have a window into their activities, or were they just sitting around and, you know, they didn't really know anything? So what do they know now? Do they know anything? Well, it's a secret, obviously. So then the press reported, specifically Der Spiegel reported that the CIA had given out warnings in advance. So the CIA was talking to, what were they actually doing to protect the pipelines? Well, that's a secret. And it's not really confirmed if that warning indeed had happened, or if that warning was just very, very broad and general. So that wouldn't have been a surprising thing. You know, a flash memo, hey, watch out, there could be sabotage along different pipelines, not just the Nord Stream pipelines, but other pipelines going from Norway to Europe. Maybe someone, like the Russians, could try to cut off Europe from certain supplies. Then Poland's previous defense minister and foreign minister, Radoslav Sikorski, thanked the United States on Twitter for blowing up the pipelines. And he was pretty frustrated in the past about how much NATO was helping Russia along until 2014. He was especially angry about the lack of American troops in Poland, and he wasn't really trusting Poland's membership in NATO. You might be a NATO member on paper, but that doesn't really mean anything if you don't have adequate troops, which was the case with Poland, and which was also part of the agreement in 1997 between NATO and Russia. So they basically agreed that Eastern European countries could join any defense alliance they want, for example NATO, under the condition that no significant troops will be created. And so yeah, that's a bit of an oddity what Sikorski did there on Twitter. His wife, Anne Applebaum, she usually never really criticizes America and Britain. She is much too connected for that. Then, of course, we saw different experts and former this and former that talking about a forensic investigation that has to happen now. But who's supposed to do this investigation? NATO experts? Military experts? Western expert companies? I mean, what could they possibly find if they can approach these explosion areas in a week or 2 weeks when it's safe to go in there? So what's left? I mean, what forensic evidence can you collect other than photographing the damage and maybe photographing or sonar analyzing some of the debris? I mean, usually when an explosion happens above water or on land, you can get a chemical signature of the explosive used, and you can tell a lot by analyzing these chemical signatures. So for example, you can tell if this is military grade, if this was home cooked, or maybe it's a certain special type of explosive mix. It's a little bit of RDX and a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But underwater, it's very difficult, especially after 2 weeks, to collect any meaningful samples. And there's another complication. You see, you may not know this, but after World War II, mountains, and I mean mountains of ammunition, of munitions were dumped in the ocean, the North Sea, and further east, where the pipelines are. And so we're talking about at least 1.6 million tons of ammo, possibly more. And some of it is still explosive, it's RDX, it's TNT, some of it is chemical weapons. So all these containers are leaking, basically, and you get certain chemicals in the water indicating the presence of TNT and RDX. So if somebody blew up the pipelines now using RDX and TNT, how can you tell which was which? So somebody might claim this was this was something that was overlooked when the pipeline was built. So you can probably never can really tell what actually happened. So it wouldn't have been that expensive to clear the ocean floor of these munitions. I think it would have been cheaper than building 2 more palaces for Russian oligarchs, or some of these black money slush funds that the Russians have at every stage of the gas and oil trade. So you have all these different front and shell companies being used, and they shift all these assets around, and you can siphon off money at every stage. And if you just use a fraction of that money, you could have just cleared the ocean floor, make sure there's no explosives left, and then you could have also surveilled the pipeline. I mean, shouldn't you clear this in advance? Shouldn't you basically assign responsibility before you before you build this pipeline? Who's going to check which section? You can't just build a pipeline of 1,000 kilometers and dump it in the ocean and not really assign responsibility. This is kind of nuts. And so, yeah, of course, there's a lot of secret stuff going on. So who was really checking what aspect of the security, we will probably never be told, or maybe in 30 years, things will be declassified, secret this and secret that. But what should be done now is less talking and more action. Germany needs to drill its own gas. There's a lot more gas than people are aware of, and you don't need fracking in many spots, but you could use fracking without damaging the environment. That can be done, and this should have been done a long time ago. And it's not really clear why this hasn't been done. It's possible that in the 1980s, secret negotiations between the Americans and the Russians, secret negotiations happened and dictated certain terms, what should happen in the future when the Soviet Union has disbanded. And this was kind of the time when the Americans stopped their opposition against certain new pipelines that were supposed to be finished in the mid-80s. And after 1991, we saw basically the destruction of German armed forces. We didn't drill our own gas. But we were allowed to reunite. So Western Germany and Soviet or former Soviet East Germany, they were reunited. And they were allowed to remain inside the NATO alliance. And so maybe those conditions applied, that we were supposed to be 30% gas dependent on Russia. And there's an interesting memo from 1981. This was very secret. It was an intelligence assessment, and it was declassified, I think, in 1999. And this basically foresaw all these complications that happened later with these new pipelines. So Moscow increasing its political influence through this whole gas trade, and then also the danger of cutting off oil supplies, or especially gas supplies. And the memo spoke about these technical difficulties. I mean, if you have overland pipelines in remote areas, it's very hard to do in a proper way. so that the pipes won't break. And when they break, it's oftentimes complicated to get repair troops, to get repair crews there and have it fixed. And so you might be looking at weeks without supplies. And the intelligence memo pressed the point that there needed to be secret, or more or less secret, backup methods and backup solutions. So maybe there's a whole secret map of Germany where you can quickly drill for gas, and we may see this plan activated at some point, but that remains to be seen. In the Soviet days, the Russians were really bad at constructing these pipelines, even though the West supplied the pipes and supplied the more complicated machines. You were rewarded in communism for putting up more miles of pipeline. You know, it wasn't linked to the quality of the work you were responsible for. It's just the amount of work you got done, and therefore, you know, these problems could arise. And now you see the speculation of how could the pipeline have been blown up. So people talk about underwater demolition teams, they talk about special torpedoes, they talk about underwater drones, but probably the most interesting scenario is that somebody placed mines along the pipeline during the construction phase or prior to the construction phase into the ocean floor. This would have been sort of a kill switch option, which you can always then deploy to take this installation out of service. And because the pipeline is so long and the ocean is so vast, it would have been fairly easy to do. So this pipeline, these pipelines, they are encased in concrete. And so if you bake in certain amounts of explosive, explosive devices, that could have been done fairly simply. So you don't want to get caught with Navy SEALs or Russian Navy SEALs and that sort of thing. It's now 2022 and ocean sensors and underwater drones have gotten a lot better, so it's easier to get caught. As I've mentioned, the ocean floor is full of old munitions, stuff that can explode, and that, of course, was a big issue in the planning phase and the construction phase. So instead of just clearing the entire ocean floor, only a corridor was cleared for the Nordstream pipelines. And certain ammunition dumps had to be circumvented, so you couldn't actually clear those, or it would have been too expensive to clear those. And so the route of the pipeline had to be changed a few times. And so then when the route was decided, you needed specialists to clear this corridor of old munitions. And so you had a threat assessment or a danger assessment from 2009 about Nord Stream. And it said that this old ammunition could cause structural damage to these pipelines. So if they detonate, the pipeline is toast. And then Nord Stream itself, or the consortium of Nord Stream, they said we took great care to clear all the ammunition, and they employed the best specialists to do that job. So along the pipelines, 25 meters to the left and 25 meters to the right, they would clear all the old ammunition. And so there are only a few companies that are good enough to do this on the ocean floor, and it is a possibility, it's a theoretical possibility that somebody deliberately overlooked something or actually placed something in the ocean floor while clearing other munitions. So that is actually doable. So when the detonation then happens, nobody could ever tell who was responsible for it. Nordstream cooperated with Backtech International Limited, a British company specializing in removing munitions from the ocean floor. And on the web, you can find some information on Backtech. They were regarded as one of the leading companies in that regard. but you can't find the company website at this point, and I haven't fully checked if this company actually still exists. Then the pipes used for the pipeline, they were stored at the harbor of Sassnitz on Rügen, and then these pipes are being welded together and encased in concrete with the help of these specialized ships. And on these ships, of course, you have the option of deliberately placing explosive devices in it. You can put them in the concrete, or you can put them on the pipes and then pour the concrete. That is actually doable. And one of the important ships used to put down the pipeline, one of the ships belonged to the Italian company of Saipem, which sort of belongs to the energy giant Eni. That's ENI. And the Italian state is the single biggest investor in Eni, which is weird. Now, a predecessor of Eni was called Agip. I think they're still around. The brand name is still around with the gas stations. And Agip was created on the direction of the Italian king, and they had American help with a company called Sinclair Oil. And then you had this notorious manager at Eni called Enrico Mattei. And during the 1940s, Enrico Mattei was working with Catholic partisan warfare guys, guerrilla warfare types, and they probably had the support of the British SOE, Special Operations Executive, and or the American OSS. So these were hardcore Catholic resistance fighters, and they fought against the Mussolini regime. And when Mussolini fell, then of course the Americans wanted to see democracy in Italy, but of course the country was not prepared for that at all. You had communists crawling around everywhere, and they were very popular in the population. And the KGB was everywhere. So the operation at the time was to fix the election of 1948. And it was clear that the Soviet KGB was financing the Communist Party of Italy. And so there was no hesitation on the side of the Americans to use the CIA and to use certain middlemen and cutouts to finance the conservative Christian party. To finance them and to get them into office and keep out the communists. And this Eni manager, Enrico Mattei, he was apparently paying off people left and right using Agip money, and he was not just buying politicians, he was buying journalists. And Agip, they even bought newspapers themselves and whole news agencies to influence public opinion. Mattei created his own personal protection detail, and he used his former Catholic partisan comrades. And at some point, he died in a suspicious plane crash, and people investigating the plane crash died, journalists and police officers. Very strange. And so it was probably easier to put in a sort of a kill switch option in the pipeline during the building phase or during the planning phase. We'll probably never know who blew up the pipelines, and it's pointless to speculate wildly or to pick and choose a scenario which you like. So some people like to blame the Russians now, some people like to blame the Americans now. We need to focus on what we do know, and we need to focus on action, not just words. So infrastructure must be protected, and we also need a whole new level of counter-espionage, counterintelligence, and to drive out these saboteurs and all these things. Now remember, there might be a secret cartel of the superpowers because they need to preserve their status. So the Americans and the Brits, China and Russia. if they don't work together secretly at the top, they would be in danger of losing power to other smaller empires or countries who want to be empires again, such as Japanese or the Turks or whoever. And with today's NBC weapons, nuclear, biological, and chemical, all kinds of countries, state actors and non-state actors, can be competitors for power. And would have been a clever plan to create a cartel of the superpowers, and this cartel could always be used to corrupt everything in society and to infiltrate anything. So the CIA wouldn't have been able to infiltrate the Italian society if it hadn't been for the threat from the East, from the Soviets. So this was the perfect excuse for everything. Well, we need to do this because, well, the KGB, because of the Russians. We can't let them win, so this is how this game was apparently played.